Hello everyone, my name is Christina Kottmann and I'm going to be discussing cognitive science in the elementary classroom. There are three cognitive scientists whose ideas I'm going to be discussing. These are Daniel Willingham, Cathy Davidson, and Daniel Kahneman. There are also 5 topics I'll be discussing. These are repetition, feedback, observable qualities of the classroom design, teaching philosophy in classroom design, and cautions for elementary educators. So let's get started. My first topic is repetition. So teachers already know that repetition helps their students remember information. And Willingham supports this by saying that tasks become automatic through repeated practice. And by being automatic, that just means that you can do them without conscious effort. You don't have to think about it, you just know how to do it. Kind of like driving a car. So this repeated action is kind of like in the classroom when you learn multiplication facts and you keep practicing them and practicing them until you just know 3 times 3 is 9. So it kind of works that way. And this is just a principle that we're already using in the classroom, but I just want to highlight it for elementary educators because it is important to recognize that you are doing something that helps your students learn. You should also recognize that repeated exposure to content should be in various contexts. And what that means is that you shouldn't always teach one idea in one area. For instance, measurement is taught across the grade levels and across subject areas. We teach it in science, we teach it in math, we teach it 5th grade, 1st grade. So measurement is overall kind of found in many different areas, and that helps students remember it too, because they're forming different associations within those different contexts. Teachers also really want their students to be able to transfer their knowledge to other areas. You don't want to just be able to use an idea in math or just in science. So teachers know that students must also review all that information, and that review, Willingham says, will help them be able to transfer it. So it's the idea of repeatedly practicing something will help you take it into different areas because it becomes automatic, and because you'll be able to see it in different areas. And also the idea of studying in intervals, which basically means that I've studied it 2 months ago and I'm going to review it today so that I don't forget what I learned 2 months ago. Rather than what I think we tend to do, and that's review everything at the end of the year, we need to be reviewing periodically throughout the year, just to make sure that information is staying current and being refreshed. And that will help your students remember it overall. So, repetition. Make sure you continue doing it. All right, my next topic is feedback. All right, so feedback, teachers already know is really important, and it's very beneficial both to themselves and to their students. You know, teachers often are told that they have to go through feedback. Somebody comes in and observes them, and we also really want our students to recognize that getting feedback from their peers will help improve their study. So Willingham encourages teachers to actually videotape themselves, kind of like what I'm doing right now, except I'd be in a classroom. And if that's not possible, to ask another teacher to come in and observe them and make notes about what's going on in their classroom and offer some positive, supportive critique. In this way, you can definitely see what errors you're making, which is a point that Kahneman makes in the importance of taking an outsider perspective to different things, because you have so many mental accounts in your head, you've already got your ideas sorted out, but somebody else can see what you can't see. And it's a lot easier to recognize somebody else's mistakes than your own, which you can also do on a video, but having another educator or someone else in your field, they'll be able to notice what specific things you should be doing or you shouldn't be doing, because they have that expertise. And Davidson also states that with regular feedback, you're more likely to catch your unproductive patterns. So you might not even know that you stand really defensively in the classroom, and you furrow your brow and you're looking down at students kind of in this angry sense. And you don't even recognize that you're doing it until you see yourself on camera or until a teacher tells you that you're doing that. And you're like, oops, I didn't even recognize that before. So now that you've recognized it, Davidson says you can start changing that. You can start making it better. Davidson also emphasizes how collaboration can really help you and your students to learn what you're doing, and just to make yourself better, because you can't recognize stuff that you can't see. It's your attention blindness. So being able to work within a team, whether it's teachers, whether it's students, and notice that something is wrong. Notice that maybe you made an error on your measurements, or you're not consistent with your behavior management. That way somebody can catch you and you can all the way over feel like you've been successful. You found something that you need to change. Kahneman also states that you and your students are more likely to learn something if you're surprised by it, meaning that you have a personal relationship to it. And the example I like to use is thinking about the gorilla experiment, and how if somebody just told you about it, you would probably just forget. You're not that interested in knowing it. But if you actually experience that, then you're going to have those emotions. You're going to have that emotional connection to it, and you're going to be more likely to remember those feelings and remember the whole experience. So in the classroom, this could look like doing a demonstration, which yes, takes a lot more time, but it's going to help your students because they're going to remember the facts that you're teaching them a lot better than if you just told them. For instance, just telling them that salt water is dense. Having them be able to experience it and see, oh, the salt water sinks to the bottom. That's going to stick with them a lot better. So overall, use feedback both for yourself as an educator and with your students, doing peer review, helping each other recognize that, okay, somebody might not have thought of this before, let's raise their hand and ask about it, and just try to bring that kind of, we want to see what we haven't seen before, that kind of idea. So that's that topic. Next one is the observable qualities of classroom design. And what I'm talking about here is like your lesson plan and the structure of your classroom, anything that someone coming into your room would be able to recognize and see. So in regards to cognitive science, teachers already know that the design of the classroom is going to be important. The way you set up your classroom kind of makes or breaks it. In certain respects, you need to have your homework folders over here, you need to have your backpacks here, otherwise it's chaos. And cognitive science has a few things to point out to educators, such as the idea of a divided workplace. This is an idea from Davidson, and she's talking about having the main task in one area, supporting information in one area, and then the fun or play break kind of stuff in one area. So these are three separate areas, and of course you could break it up any way you'd like, but those are the ways she suggests. And what this might look like in the classroom is actually not having play all over the classroom, and I'm specifically talking about the lower grades, pre-K, K, and 1, but having a separate play area. And then maybe not having all of your books everywhere, but having a certain area where you keep your books, or you keep your text, or the teacher presents information that could be used in the project. And then, as you probably want to be doing a lot of projects, I'll get to that in a minute, you can have an area for project work, classroom tables, a lot of areas for students to explore. So that's a way you could break up your classroom using the principles of cognitive science and this divided workplace, which helps your mind refocus to the different tasks. Davidson also supports having inquiry-based opportunities in the classroom and suggests that in these opportunities in inquiry, the teacher does not control the outcomes. The teacher is only a guide for the outcomes. So the teacher just helps the students figure out where they'd like to go in their study and helps them get the resources for that, but she or he does not control where that student is going with this project. It's totally them. And what this could look like in the classroom, inquiry at least, is the students might explore the geography around them and decide how they want to categorize shapes. And they could refer to the way we actually categorize shapes, by vertices and line segments, but they could also come up with their own ideas and figure out what is special about this shape. How do I figure out which category it belongs in? And that could be a way that they explore the topic on their own. Davidson also highlights gaming elements, such as having a final objective, a sequence of problems, one leading to another, collaboration, and a lot of creativity, especially in your thinking. And she mentions that games are like interactive stories. So what this could look like in the classroom is maybe your students go through leveled tasks as they learn about a subject. Maybe it's European exploration, and they have to first help X explorer find his way here, and then help this explorer then trade with the natives. And by going through those different tasks, it kind of gets them engaged. It would help them see learning as more of a play kind of thing, and rather than as a tedious task that they have to go through. Davidson also recommends crowdsourcing, at least as a topic that you could definitely use in your classroom. And the whole idea of crowdsourcing is that it's difference and diversity, and trying to bring out as many opposing opinions or different opinions as possible. And you're trying to get everyone to think, what if this, but what if that? And so it's really trying to get your students to be encouraged to like think outside of themselves, think about the differing opinions that haven't been recognized yet, and try to play devil's advocate almost. And the idea is that collectively we're smarter than each one of us individually, and we all have something to share and something to learn. And that's just a great idea to have in the classroom in general, but especially just to emphasize it, especially in discussions and the way that you present information, to let the students know that I want difference. I want everyone to think of something that somebody else hasn't said before, that somebody else hasn't just already known. Think about the different ways we could go about something. Willingham, in regards to classroom design and the observable qualities, suggests designing your lessons with a story structure. And this kind of goes back to what Davidson is saying about the games are interactive stories, so you can kind of mold them together. But thinking about a story structure, this is how you might design your lesson. So you might actually follow a water molecule through the steps of the water cycle. And therefore you have a character, you have a setting, you have different events that happen. And this would make it a lot more engaging to your students, assumingly, and would help them kind of see, oh, this event happens, and oh, the water molecule survived. Okay, now he's falling. And that kind of idea of you're connecting to it in a much more concrete way rather than as an abstract, this is the water cycle, it happens over here separate from you. Your brain is also better at comprehending story structures, which is what Willingham was talking about. Willingham also asked the teacher to focus on developing questions in the classroom, because I think a lot of times we emphasize answers. The tests always emphasize answers, but coming up with amazing questions is just as important, if not more. And you really want to build this into your classroom by maybe asking at the beginning of a unit, what questions do you guys have about this unit? You might already come in with something, but what do you want to know? What do you want to get out of this unit? Because ultimately, it's for their benefit. You could be teaching it, but they're the ones gaining something, hopefully. So you could have them come up with questions at the beginning. You should also have them come up with questions throughout the study and like ask each other, oh, have you already found what kind of habitat the jungle cat lives in? It's the jungle. But, kind of building off of each other and having a whole understanding of questions in your classroom. One thing I want to do is have a questions wall, so that sometimes when you can't answer a question at that moment, or you need to go and find more research on it, you post it up on the questions wall. And that recognizes that questions are important and that they should have a valid place in the classroom. Okay, Willingham, also supports reviewing background knowledge before you introduce new knowledge. And this is because you want students to be able to form associations in their brain, connect maybe their experience of going to the ocean with what you're talking about with the way the ocean slopes and the rise in continental plate and everything, so that they can recognize, oh, I've been out there on the continental shelf when I was at the beach. That's what I was walking on. And they make that connection, and that information sinks in a little bit easier. Okay. Willingham also tells teachers that it's really important to teach students how to identify what's important. And basically what that means is that you can't assume that your students can read a giant text and pull out the important key points. That's a skill you have to learn over time, and that they really have to be taught. So maybe as you're going through a presentation, you're going through notes, you can tell the students, oh, this is really important because it's an important meeting, or because this led to an important outcome, rather than just highlighting randomly and they have no idea what you're doing, because students really need to be shown what's important and how you are recognizing it. And that's kind of also like modeling your teaching, talking it out, saying, I'm highlighting this because, and going through that process. Okay, sorry that was long. Next topic. This is upside down. Classroom design in regards to your teaching philosophy. So what I'm talking about here is these aren't elements you'd necessarily tell your students, but it's the way that you believe about teaching and how those aspects influence the way you interact in the classroom and that atmosphere. And teachers design their classrooms to reflect their beliefs. It makes sense. You design your room the way you want to design your room. You design your classroom the same way. It's what makes sense to you, makes you feel comfortable. So Davidson points out that the factors that you pay attention to as a teacher are the factors that you're going to praise. So if you believe that math is the greatest subject of all time, you are more likely to praise students in math. But if you don't see science as valid, you're not going to praise them in science. Or, you don't consider art a decent use of time, you're not going to praise a student's artwork. It's all about what you pay attention to. And just recognizing that, you can try to catch yourself making those distinctions, saying, I haven't praised anyone in this subject today, or I haven't recognized anyone's hard work in this subject. And you can make that change. Willingham encourages teachers to praise students on effort rather than ability. And ability is what you're innately born with. You're either good at something or you're bad at something. Terrible at basketball, for instance. But your effort is under your control, because intelligence is the result of hard work and perseverance, according to Willingham. And you really need to show your students that their effort is what matters, not their innate ability, because they have control over their effort. And giving students that control will help them see that their education is completely up to them. Their success is a choice that they make. So one way you could do that is giving students praise and recognizing that they're working hard on something, rather than they just got an A or got a B, whatever. It's that even if they didn't totally make it, they were working really hard on that project. Willingham also defines cognitive ability versus cognitive style. And what he's talking about here is that cognitive ability is across a spectrum, meaning that you're born with it, or more or less you have some already in you, while cognitive style is the way that you want to learn. You might be a really visual learner. You might really want to work with your hands and be able to touch and experiment with something. But his warning to teachers is that you need to differentiate by ability, for sure. You can't have the low students with the high students in math, because it's not going to be productive for anyone. But differentiating on style is really not going to help them all that much, unless the topic is assessing that style. So unless your visual learner is actually being assessed on their visual perception, it's not going to help them that it's more visual. And basically, overall, teachers just need to differentiate by ability. And if you hit style, great. If you don't stress about it. Kottmann suggests that you think in a broad frame. So this is thinking long term, thinking about how wins and losses kind of average out over time, and that idea will help soften emotional reactions to loss, because you'll start to see that loss as, I got a bad grade right now, but I'll make it up later because I'll do better on the next assignment, or now I can recognize my mistakes and I can do better the next time. So this would look like a student recognizing that they've done poorly on assignment, but they don't get hard on themselves because they realize, okay, I know I did bad now, but by the end of the 9 weeks or by the end of the term, I'll do better. I now can recognize that I've got a longer term understanding of my place in the class, and I can see where I need to change. And this will just help with the emotional reactions that you sometimes get with students who really get so hard on themselves with a bad grade, and you can try to have them think, no, it's over the long term, you'll do better in the future, and it all averages out. All right, Davidson stresses the importance of seeing strengths where others see limitations. And what this would look like in the classroom is not just students with learning disabilities, but physical handicaps as well, and being able to recognize that that student has a strength regardless of whatever conditions or problems they have otherwise. So maybe a student with autism has a really great eye for detail, and that might be related to their autism, but it might not. And then maybe a student who's in a wheelchair has a beautiful way with words. You know, they're an excellent writer, they make beautiful poetry, they can speak with such expression, and just recognizing those strengths in your students rather than seeing them as limited by some other reason. Davidson also focuses on developing leadership with your students, and specifically mentions helping students become their best by being a player coach. And this is especially potent for your students because they can help each other and encourage each other to be better by just having that opportunity to share their strengths with others, and that opportunity to kind of, breathe that life into someone else, to be that leader. Go up to a student who's struggling and be like, I really just, do you need any help with anything? Let me help you. What are you struggling with? Let's work together. And offering that kind of help will help them find out what that student's strengths are and help that student become their best. And it's also developing that student's leadership, because now they're taking on the perspective of, I'm helping someone else rather than I'm just helping myself. Davidson also states the importance of independence and self-discipline, because these are characteristics of the future workplace and also the future classroom, I believe. So this might look like students really taking charge of their education and coming into the classroom and deciding, this is what project I want to start today. This is what project I need to have a little bit of time with. I need to talk to my group first. In the lower grades, it could look like students coming in and already knowing that they need to move their lunch choice, they need to put their backpack up, they need to get started on their morning work. They've already got not so much a routine, but this idea of, it's my choice what I do with my time. You can also have students maybe have a checklist of the things they need to get done that day, their daily objectives, that might correlate with yours as the teacher, but might not. They might say, I need to get 3 problems done in math today. Well, you want the students to finish the whole worksheet or the whole paper. So that's another way you can think about classroom design and your teaching philosophy. All right, last one. Cautions for teachers. Now, these are specifically important because cognitive science gives us an insight into some of the ways that students' brains work, and our brains as well. And knowing these will help your classroom run a little bit smoother. So Willingham warns that making content relevant to students can be a distraction. And what he means by this is that if you discuss football and math, your students might go totally off on a tangent and want to discuss football teams and statistics in football and everything, but you need them to be focusing on math. So just be aware that if you're trying to make it relevant, it can become a distraction. Now, it's all about how you use it and what your students are used to and how much they can focus. But just be aware of that. Davidson emphasizes how attitude is everything. And I'm sure a lot of teachers already would agree with me on this, that it affects your cognitive learning, it affects your physical health, your attitude, especially about your ability to change or to influence your life, is going to affect you a lot. Because it's your confidence, it's your understanding that I have a role in my own life. Things aren't happening to me. I can actually make a change, make a choice. And so in your classroom, just recognize that having a poor attitude, or your students having a poor attitude, really does affect their ability to learn. And it's their ability to be successful and their ability to understand that I can change my attitude, I can change my learning in this class. So just be aware of that. Kottmann mentions that having insufficient adjustment might happen in your class because of existing anchors with your students. And what I'd like to think about with this is, maybe you ask a student to pay attention. We say that a lot. But that student was kneeling on the ground looking for a book. So their adjustment to pay attention is looking up at you. where you meant they need to be in their chair, have their workout, looking up at you, all three things. But they have adjusted, they just haven't adjusted enough to, to make you not tell them again, pay attention. So just be aware that, sometimes students won't adjust fully and you need to be really specific with your instructions. Instead of saying pay attention, you can say, please be in your seat looking at me, have your workout in front of you. Those sorts of things. Kahneman also stresses that the negative or the bad is really emphasized in memory and that we try to avoid loss whenever possible. So thinking about this in regards to the classroom, you might have a student who's really, really worried about failing a test, and that consumes them because it's a really strong motivator, but it can really hurt their health, especially in just their stress level and their ability to focus on anything else. They also might be really worried about something that's going on at home, and that influences their ability to concentrate in your class and ability to pay attention. So the bad has a bigger impact on us, and it's also meaning in the classroom is that you need to be really careful about what kind of bad you emphasize because it's going to stick with them. You want to be sure that you're helping them and not just calling them out for something that's insignificant because it's going to stick. All right. Kottmann also mentions that you're really distracted almost 50 to 80% of the time by your own brain, which is really kind of annoying because you can be sitting there in class and staring at the teacher, but your brain is completely somewhere else. So teachers just need to really be aware of this, and it's not that the student is necessarily distracted by something else happening in the classroom, but maybe just by their own thoughts. And focus really does take a conscious effort, and you need to give students regular breaks and help them focus in on the content, because if you just talk at them for too long, their brains are gone. I mean, we already know this. Kahneman also highlights the law of least effort, and this is especially important to teachers because you need to offer balanced choices. Of course, choice is really good in the class and really good to offer students, but you can't have one choice that's significantly easier than the others. You can't tell them, oh, would you like to color, or would you like to color and write, or would you like to perform a play? They're going to choose color. It's the easier option, unless they have some intrinsic motivation to do something else. So you just got to be careful that you're offering choices that require the same amount of effort because students will choose the easiest one. Kahneman also discusses the priming effect, and this subtly allows you to manipulate students' actions and their responses, and you just need to be aware that you can do this. Not saying that you should use it, but just that if you guys are going to be talking about pollution and the global food crisis and how everyone in Africa is, sickly or dying of health problems, your student is going to feel that, and it's going to carry with them probably into whatever reactions they have the rest of the day. If they go to lunch and you've just talked about pollution, they're probably going to recycle their stuff. If you've just talked about the global food crisis, they're probably going to eat their entire meal. And you can recognize this, and it's just not that you should use it, but just be aware of it because you can bring out a lot of strong emotions in students by talking about something, and that might prime their reactions to the next thing. Kahneman also discusses the anchoring effect, which is mostly related to numbers, but just to be aware of if you're giving them a problem or you're giving them an example verbally, whatever number you suggest is going to serve as an anchor for them to hold on to. So if you say, oh, it might be like 25 feet, they might hold on to that 25, even though it has nothing to do with the problem, just because you've said it. So in word problems, be really careful what you include, because those words are going to stick. All right. That is all I have about cognitive science in the classroom, but please feel free to offer any suggestions, comments. I'm sorry this was long. I have a lot to say, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. So thanks. See ya.